The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
Brianna hit my baby during our Christmas meal. The noise of the slap filled the whole room. It was a sharp sound that actually made the buzzing from the ring light stop for a brief moment. My little boy, Leo, started to cry, but then he went quiet. Nobody even glanced at him. My sister didn't look, and my parents didn't either. They all just stared at me instead. They were waiting for me to do what I usually did. They wanted me to say I was sorry. They wanted me to act small and tell them I was being too dramatic. I stayed completely still, but someone else in the room moved. My husband, David, pushed his chair back from the table. He did this slowly and on purpose. It was the kind of movement that changes how a room feels before anyone even says a word. He looked Brianna straight in the eyes. He spoke in a quiet voice and said, "Get out!" I had already gotten everything ready in my head without saying a word. I was choosing to trade this moment for the rest of my life. You can stay here and tell me if I was right or if I was wrong. I learned how to hide away long before I even knew what that word really meant. When I was 9 years old, I used to stand at the very end of the room where my grandparents ate dinner. I stood right by an old chair made of wood that had a seat with faded fabric. Everyone else just thought of it as an extra chair, but I knew it was my spot. From that corner, I watched my sister, Brianna. She was 11 years old back then. She was louder than me, and it always felt like a bright light was following her. She was always the one put in the middle of every family picture. My mom, Linda, would fix Brianna's hair and lift up her chin. She would say, "They're perfect." If I tried to move forward, she would push me back with a soft hand and a fake smile. She told me to let my sister be the star. My dad, Robert, never said a word against it. He would just mess with the camera settings. He acted like he didn't see me standing there in the corner. He acted like he didn't hear the sound of that lonely chair as I sat back down. The pattern didn't start there, but it is the first time I can remember really feeling it inside myself. Once I brought home a certificate from school for an award. Brianna accidentally got juice all over it. Instead of seeing if I was okay, Mom ran to make Brianna feel better. She said Brianna didn't mean to do it. She told me, "You know how sensitive your sister is." Sensitive. I heard that word way more than I ever heard my own name. Every time I felt unsure or asked a question or just existed at the wrong time, Mom would whisper it. She said it like it was a medical problem that excused how everyone else acted. Dad's part in this was just staying neutral. He would always murmur, "Don't make this bigger than it is." That phrase followed me all through my childhood like a shadow. It was always there, making everything flat. When we were teenagers, the distance between us got even bigger. When Brianna wanted to go to a concert, they told me to give her the cash I had earned from babysitting. Mom said I was good at planning things, like being responsible was a natural resource that I owed the family. When I needed a ride for a school project, they forgot to pick me up twice. The third time, Dad just said, "Ask your sister." But she had already gone out with her friends. When I turned 18, I thought things would change because I was an adult. They didn't. At family dinners, Brianna's stories were the only ones that filled the table. If I tried to talk, somebody would stop me. If I didn't agree with something, the whole room got tense. Mom would say, "Sarah, you're reading too much into things." And there it was again. That was my signal to be quiet before everyone at the table turned against me. Years went by. I moved away and started my own life with my own habits. But the old way of thinking stayed with me. I still felt like I had to step back and be soft. I didn't want to mess up the balance that protected everyone except me. I didn't really see how much that silence cost me until Leo was born. When my baby cried and Brianna yelled at me for being too dramatic, something inside me started to crack. It was something old. It was shaped like that old wooden chair with the faded seat. It didn't break all the way yet, but it moved enough for me to see it. Looking back, I can tell you exactly when that pattern became permanent. It was that night with the camera flashes. Mom turned to me and said, "Sarah, stop being so sensitive." That was the day I found out exactly where I fit in this family. After that Christmas dinner, the house was very quiet. It didn't feel like a peaceful kind of quiet. It just felt heavy. I was standing in the hallway rocking Leo. I could feel his breath going up and down against my shoulder. The red mark on his face was not as bright now, but it was still there. It looked like it was blaming someone under the light of the lamp. I heard someone walking behind me. The steps were slow and the person sounded sure of themselves. I didn't have to look to know it was Brianna. My sister stopped a few feet away from me. She had her arms crossed. Her voice already sounded like the way she talks when she wants to win an argument without looking like a mean person. She said, "You made a big scene." Then she said, "Honestly, Sarah, you are overreacting again." That word again felt like an old injury opening up. I didn't give her an answer. I just moved Leo in my arms and pressed my hand against his back. I used that feeling to keep myself steady. In my family, silence usually meant the fight was over because it meant I was giving up. She waited for me to give in like she always did. When I didn't give her the reaction she wanted, she made a loud huffing sound. She acted like I was annoying her. She said, "You know Mom agrees with me." She told me that Mom said I was too emotional for anyone to take me seriously. My throat felt very tight, but I didn't let my face move. I had practiced that for many years. Brianna came a little bit closer and lowered her voice. She told me that if I wanted the family to stay normal, I needed to stop turning everything into drama. She said I made them look bad. She used the word us, like I lived on the outside of a door that they kept locking. I shifted my weight and felt the wall against my shoulder. The wallpaper smelled like cinnamon because of the holiday candles. For a second, I just listened to the sound of plates in the distance and someone laughing in the dining room. I heard Leo breathe out slowly. Everything else felt very sharp and thin. I finally looked at her. I wasn't mad and I wasn't scared. I just saw everything clearly. It was quiet and clean. She blinked because she was confused that I didn't fall apart. She asked, "You heard me, right?" I told her, "I heard you." My voice stayed steady. Something changed in the way she looked. She didn't understand why my silence felt different this time. She just knew that I wasn't going to bend. When I walked away, she didn't come after me. She didn't realize that the moment she called me dramatic, the plan they had for my life started to fall apart. I didn't break down and I didn't snap. I just stopped making myself smaller. That was the start of everything that happened later. I didn't feel mad when I left the house. I left with Leo held against my chest. His breath was warm through my clothes. The cold air felt tight around us like the night was trying to keep me awake. David walked in front of me. He carried the diaper bag in one hand. His other hand was near my back. He didn't touch me, but he was sensing where I was. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't because we were avoiding things. It was because we knew what was happening. Once we were home, I put Leo in his bed. His little fist opened and closed while he fell asleep. He didn't know about the mess he had been part of. I watched his chest go up and down. Then I went into the hallway where the light was softer. My fingers touched the bracelet on my arm like I always do. Something inside me finally clicked. I didn't cry and I didn't yell. I didn't keep playing the slap over and over in my head. I started moving. In the living room, the lamp made a quiet glow on the table. I put my phone down and opened a blank note. My thumbs stayed over the screen for a second. Then I typed the first line, December 25th, 7:15 p.m. Leo hit. Then I added the details. I wrote about the angle of the light and how far we were from the table. I wrote about the time my son stopped crying. The words looked clean and sharp, like cutting a straight line through a piece of cloth. When I finished that, I went to my photos. I found the picture I took in the hallway. It showed Leo's face and the red mark. I saved it in a folder called Leo Health Notes. I wasn't doing this because I was mad. I was doing it to be exact. Next, I went to the family group chat. I took pictures of the screen for everything that was important. I saved my mother's mean text from last month. I saved Brianna's messages about filming her videos. I saved the message where Linda told me not to ruin the mood with my worries. I put every picture in its own folder with a label. After that, I opened the computer file I use for house planning. I made a new tab for a timeline. I made another one for what people saw. I made another one for the messages. My fingers moved faster as I built the structure. I sat on the couch with my legs under me. I pulled the blanket over the arm of the couch. The house was quiet except for the sound of the keyboard and the heater. David walked into the room. He stopped behind me and put a warm cup of tea next to my elbow. He didn't ask what I was doing. He saw the folders and the picture of Leo. He only said, "Take your time." Then he stepped back to give me space. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was okay. I needed things to be clear. I made a file for all the medical notes since Leo was born. I wrote down his temperatures, his visits to the doctor, and how he ate. I wasn't trying to use these as a weapon. I wanted to protect him. I wanted to show the truth without raising my voice. I wanted to build something solid so nobody could say I was overreacting. The clock on the wall went past midnight. I kept typing. I also looked through my folders for bills, checking receipts, and all the normal papers adults have to keep. I looked at the dates and compared them to things people said. I started to see patterns that I usually didn't pay attention to. It wasn't because they didn't matter, but because I was just used to ignoring them. These papers showed something very important. For many years, I was the one doing all the hard emotional work and all the planning for this family. All that time, I was treated like I was just a background character in my own life. I pulled the computer closer and made one last tab in the file. I simply called it recommendations. I wasn't being dramatic and I wasn't trying to be mean. It was just a list of steps for how to take care of Leo, how to set boundaries for talking, and how to stay safe. It was about the truth. Then I did the hardest part. I had to send the email. I wrote it very slowly and read every single word out loud in my mind. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything and I wasn't making any threats. I was just writing down the facts. It was a neutral and steady message. I sent it to a legal expert I had talked to once before when I was having a hard time with my job after I had my baby. I attached all the folders, the timeline, and the pictures. My finger stayed over the send button for a moment. I let out one deep and quiet breath, and then I pushed it. The sound the computer made as the email left felt like a door shutting very softly. It wasn't a big show, but it felt final. David came back and leaned against the door frame. He asked, "You sure?" I told him, "Yes, I'm done being the only one who remembers what actually happened." I stood up and stretched my body. I felt the pain in my shoulders for the first time. The living room looked exactly the same as it always did with the lamp, the couch, and the toy box. But the air felt different now. It was like I was standing in a room that had just been cleaned of something you couldn't see. I walked over to Leo's bed and put my hand on his back. I felt the steady rhythm of him breathing. His innocence felt heavier to me now. It wasn't because he needed to be hidden, but because I finally understood what it meant to really protect him. Being strong doesn't always mean you have to be loud. Sometimes you are strong when you write things down. Sometimes you are strong when you are quiet. As I stood there looking at my son, I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to be the person who fixed what they had broken this time. A few days later, we went back to the house. It looked different. It didn't feel warm or decorated. It just looked dark. The holiday lights in the window were blinking in a weird way, like they were tired of pretending everything was fine. We were there because my mother told us we had to have a family talk. She sounded very defensive on the phone. She didn't even ask me how Leo was doing. David carried Leo in his car seat and put it down gently near the door. I didn't take my coat off. The air inside still smelled like cinnamon and something metallic. The ring light from the Christmas dinner was on the floor and wasn't plugged in. Its legs were spread out like a piece of broken equipment. Brianna was already sitting at the table. Her arms were crossed and she looked like she had practiced her expression. She looked like she was somewhere between being mad and being innocent. My mother stood behind her like she was trying to protect her from an accusation that hadn't been said yet. My father moved a chair, but he didn't sit down. He watched David with a worried look that I had never seen before. Linda started talking first. She said, "Sarah, we all think you misunderstood what happened." It was the same line I had heard for years. It was like a script. Before I could say anything, Brianna added, "You made everything worse by sending that email. You blindsided us." I looked at her and then I looked at the table. This was the same table where she had slapped my baby. It was the same table where everyone's silence was louder than his crying. David did not sit down. He put both of his hands on the back of a chair. I could see the muscles in his arms were tight, but he was in control. He said, "We're here so everyone can hear the truth." His voice was very level. Mom made a scoffing sound. She said, "The truth, Sarah has always." She stopped talking when David stood up straight. He wasn't the kind of man who yelled, but he had a very strong presence. Right now, his presence made the whole room feel smaller. I reached into my bag and put a thin folder on the table. I wasn't being dramatic, it was just paper. It had the photos, the timelines, the messages, and the notes. Everything was clean and it had no emotion in it. My father looked confused. He asked, "What is all this documentation?" I said very quietly, "Documentation, since none of you looked at him that night." Brianna rolled her eyes. She said, "You're blowing this out of proportion." David cut in. His voice was calm but sharp. He said, "She slapped an infant." The words landed heavier than the folder. Silence spread through the room. I opened the first page. It was the photo of Leo's cheek, and you could see the faint mark under the hallway light. I said, "This was taken 10 minutes after dinner. I sent it to a pediatric specialist. Her assessment is attached." David cut her off. His voice wasn't loud, but it was very sharp. He said, "She slapped an infant." Those words made the whole room go completely silent. I opened the folder to the very first page. It was the photo of Leo's cheek. You could see the mark clearly under the hallway light. I told them, "This was taken 10 minutes after dinner. I sent it to a pediatric specialist. Her assessment is attached." My mother's face looked very tense. She said, "Sarah, you didn't have to escalate this." I looked at her and replied, "I didn't, the system did." I moved to the next page. It had my notes about the risks, the advice from the legal expert, and the proof that now existed outside of the family's control. I told them that this wasn't about trying to punish anyone. I said, "It's about protecting my child." Brianna pushed her chair back so hard it made a loud scraping noise. She said, "You're making me look like a monster." "No," I answered her. "I'm showing what happened." She stood up very fast and her eyes were flashing. She said, "You're pathetic, Sarah. You always need to feel like the victim." Before I could feel that old pain in my throat, David stepped forward. He was slow and steady. He said, "Enough." Brianna opened her mouth to keep fighting. David didn't give her a chance. He looked her straight in the eye, just like he did on the night of the slap. He said the words that were sharper than any anger. He said, "Get out." The room went still. My mother made a gasping sound. My father's jaw twitched. Brianna just stood there, caught between being mad and not believing what was happening. David added, "You can leave, we will." The power in the room shifted so quietly. For the first time in my whole life, I watched my sister look around the room for someone to defend her, but she found nobody who would do it. She grabbed her purse and said something under her breath, but she wouldn't look at me. She avoided the folder and she avoided the truth. She walked out without looking back once. The door made a small clicking sound when it shut. It was a small noise, but it felt like a huge ending. I took a steady breath. My mother was the first one to speak and her voice was shaking. She asked, "Sarah, what happens now?" I closed the folder. I said, "Now, the rest is in motion, and for once it's not my job to fix it." The house felt lighter after she left, even though the walls and the furniture were the same. The air didn't feel like I was waiting for someone else to tell me I was okay anymore. It felt like the silence had finally changed sides. We drove home and we didn't talk. Leo slept the whole way. His breath made a little bit of fog on the edge of his blanket. David kept one hand on the wheel and his other hand was near mine. He wasn't touching me, but he was just there. That is how quiet support feels. I watched the city go by through the window. Everything looked normal, but I didn't feel like my old self at all. When we got home, I took Leo into the backyard. The winter sun was low over the grass. It was soft and it didn't feel empty. I put him down near the patio. He pulled himself up using the legs of the wooden bench. He was wobbling, but he looked very determined. He laughed, and it was a small, bubbly sound. It was a sound that didn't have anything to do with what other people expected of him. I sat down next to him and let the moment stay there. For many years, I thought silence meant I was giving up. I had learned to step back and be soft so the family could stay together. But watching Leo try to stand up on his own, I understood something very simple that couldn't be changed. Silence only hurts when it belongs to someone else. When it belongs to you, it is something else entirely. It is a boundary and it is a beginning. The folder I had closed at my parents' house was sitting on the kitchen counter. Nobody called me and there were no frantic messages or apologies. There was just open space that wasn't cluttered. She never came back. I didn't feel bitter about it, and I wasn't celebrating. It was just the truth. A clean line was drawn where there used to be chaos. A light wind moved through the yard and brushed Leo's hair. He moved his hands and took one small, shaky step toward me. I held my hands out, but I didn't pull him toward me. I let him find his own balance. In that quiet time, something inside me finally let go. It was something I had been carrying since I was a child, and it was shaped like that wooden chair at the end of the table. For the first time, the silence felt like it was mine. The yard got quiet as the last light went behind the fence. Only the grass made a soft sound. Leo watched me with big eyes that didn't have any burdens. I breathed in the cold air and let it settle where my fear used to be. The past didn't just disappear, but it didn't control my life anymore. Families can break in loud ways, but they can also break in silence. Sometimes that silence is the very first honest sound you ever hear. Boundaries are not about getting revenge. They are the place where your life finally starts. If you have ever lived through a silence like this one, tell me what it taught you. Share the moment when everything changed for you. I am listening. And somewhere out there, there is someone who needs to hear your story, and they are listening too.